Hey guys! Tonight we step onto a trail older than memory itself. Long before high-speed trains and customs declarations, there was the Silk Road. You're waking up in the city of Chang'an, known today as Xi'an, just as the sky starts to yawn itself open in that cool violet hush before sunrise. A few streets away, roosters are losing their minds. Carts creak under crates of porcelain and bolts of silk, and someone's loudly arguing over dried apricots. But for now, you're lying under a quilt that smells faintly of jasmine and goat. Your legs are stiff from yesterday's preparations, and your stomach grumbles with nerves. You're about to join a caravan headed west, toward places you can barely pronounce, let alone imagine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to see where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle out of your bedroll, wrapping yourself in a rough robe dyed with indigo that's already fading at the elbows. Outside your modest room at the caravanserai, camels grunt in protest as handlers tug at their reins. One particularly disagreeable one keeps trying to bite anyone who walks too close. You're told its name is Jinzhao, which supposedly means golden morning. That's a lie. It's clearly Satan in camel form. The merchants around you are a motley group. Persians with jewel-toned sashes, Indian spice traders balancing bundles on their heads, and one elderly Greek fellow who insists on wearing sandals in this weather. He says the Romans taught him the secret to blister prevention. You suspect it's just wine. You were hired as an extra hand, a mule tender, an errand runner, a hey you go do this kind of person. But the truth is, you're here because you're chasing something bigger. Wonder, or profit, or possibly a very vague midlife crisis. As the sun peeks up over the tiled rooftops of Xi'an, casting golden light on walls painted with dragons and scholars, the great gates swing open with a groan. This city once served as the capital of multiple Chinese dynasties, including the mighty Tang, and its history hangs thick in the air. The stones you step on have felt the weight of emperors, monks, and horses. Lots of horses. You pass the Big Wild Goose Pagoda, a 7-story structure jutting into the dawn like a defiant finger. Built in 652 CE, it once stored Buddhist scriptures brought from India by the monk Xuanzang. Some say his ghost still lingers in the upper chambers, flipping pages and judging tourists. You nod to it anyway. Never hurts to be polite to ghosts. The road out of town is surprisingly loud. You were expecting silence, just the jingle of bridles and crunch of boots. But no, there's a flute player marching alongside the caravan who clearly thinks he's auditioning for the emperor's court. Someone throws a date pit at him. He plays louder. Within a few hours, Xi'an shrinks behind you into haze. The farms thin out. The road turns dusty. You've officially entered the Silk Road, an ancient network of trade routes connecting China to Central Asia, the Middle East, and eventually the Mediterranean. Historians still argue whether it's more accurate to think of it as one road or a web of paths. But for you, it's just long and full of blisters. Your tasks are small at first. You check camel packs, adjust knots, run messages from the caravan leader, a sunburned woman with a voice like gravel and a dagger longer than your arm, to the rest of the group. She's known as Madame Wei, and rumor has it she once bit a bandit and gave him tetanus. As you walk, you notice the guards aren't just watching the horizon, they're watching each other. Trust runs thin in caravans. One misplaced item, one vanishing trinket, and everyone's a suspect. To blend in, you keep your head down and your ears open. Around midday, you pass the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. You can't see it, it's heavily guarded, but you can feel the weight of legend as you pass. Somewhere nearby lies the Terracotta Army, thousands of clay soldiers frozen mid-march to protect an emperor in the afterlife. Local superstition says the ground around here breathes. You wonder if that's metaphorical or literal. You stop that thought. This is not the time to get spooked. At nightfall, the caravan halts by a narrow river, its waters gleaming orange in the firelight. You sit cross-legged, gnawing on hard bread and dried plums. Beside you, a young woman from Samarkand plucks at a stringed instrument, singing softly in a language you don't understand. It's haunting. Half the group listens. The other half pretends not to. In the shadows beyond the firelight, you hear rustling. Could be wolves, could be thieves, or, honestly, it could be Jinzhao trying to pee on someone's tent again. You don't investigate. That's someone else's problem. The stars above are impossibly bright. No cities here to dull them out. A man from the Indus region points out constellations you've never seen before. He says they guide his people through the mountains. He also says one of them looks like a goose pooping fire. You squint? Yeah, you see it. As you lie down to sleep, your head resting against a sack of ginger, you realize you're already sunburned. Your feet are already sore. And this is just day one. The journey ahead will take you through some of the most treacherous landscapes on Earth, from deserts that whisper and steal your name, to mountains that scrape the belly of the sky. You'll trade with kings and argue with pickpockets, brush against legends and diseases alike. But for now, under this sky, with the smell of dust and cinnamon thick in the air, you're just a traveler among many, wrapped in a story bigger than your own. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you'll enter the Taklamakan Desert, the one travelers call the place of no return. You should probably pack extra socks. You rise with a dry throat and a stiffer back, blinking against the pale golden glare of sunrise. The sound of canvas being folded, camels groaning their protests, and someone muttering curses in at least 3 languages makes for a uniquely abrasive alarm clock. No snooze button here. Just dust in your eyes and the distant growl of wind stirring the Taklamakan Desert. It looms ahead of you like a faded mirage, its dunes stretching into a hazy infinity, veiled in heat shimmer. The name Taklamakan comes with a warning built in, often translated as, "Go in and you won't come out." Cheerful, a fitting start to your day. You're now entering one of the harshest deserts on Earth, a place so dry that even the whispers of past caravans seem to flake off the air like sand. It spans the Tarim Basin, framed by the Kunlun Mountains to the south and the Tian Shan to the north. Once, massive rivers wound through here. Now, the only things that move with certainty are the wind and your camels behind. Jinzhao, naturally, chooses today to develop a limp. You're not even sure if it's real or dramatic flair. He stares at you with bulging, judgmental eyes every time you check his hooves. Honestly, you're starting to suspect he reads minds. The caravan stretches thin now, a brittle thread across the dunes. There's less talking. Every step kicks up clouds of powder-fine sand, and your mouth tastes like toasted limestone. Sunlight glares down with the precision of an interrogation lamp. Your water flask grows lighter with each sip, and you ration it like a miser counts coins. Just enough to wet your lips, not enough to quench the thirst. This stretch of the Silk Road is especially infamous, not just because of the weather, but because of the ancient cities buried beneath the dunes. Lost oases like Nia and Lulan, swallowed whole by the sand centuries ago, occasionally cough up fragments of a forgotten world. Scraps of paper, hair combs, even preserved human remains with shockingly intact eyebrows. Historians still argue whether these cities were abandoned due to climate shifts, water source changes, or wars. But you're more focused on keeping your socks sand-free. Mid-morning, the caravan halted by a cluster of withered tamarisk shrubs that barely qualify as shade. You chew on a strip of dried lamb jerky that tastes like salted leather, and listen to an elderly Buddhist monk explain how silence is the true path to inner peace. He's then interrupted by a camel fart so aggressive, it startles 3 pigeons out of a nearby crate. Back on the trail, the heat bends light until everything ahead looks like it's melting. You begin to spot what you think are lakes, shimmering, glorious pools of cool, inviting water. But each time you stumble toward one, breath catching in hope, it vanishes. Mirages are cruel like that. Your brain knows they aren't real. Your feet keep chasing them anyway. Around midday, a younger member of the caravan, a bright-eyed apprentice trader named Anil, gets separated for just 15 minutes. Panic sets in like wildfire. You shout his name into the wind, but the dunes eat sound. Everyone knows stories of what happens when you wander off here. By some miracle, or maybe sheer luck, he reappears near sunset, sunburned and shaken, muttering about following a blue flag that turned out to be a tarp stuck in a shrub. The caravan leader doesn't yell. She just hands him water and slaps him upside the head, gently. That night, Camp is made in a shallow hollow protected by wind-worn rocks. The fire flickers low. There's no wood here, so the fuel is a mix of dung and dried roots. It smells exactly like you think it does. An old man named Kareem shares a tale of the Ghost Caravan, a band of travelers who vanished in the Taklamakan centuries ago, only to appear in dreams, offering directions or warnings to those who pass through. Some swear they hear phantom bells in the wind, or see faint lanterns bobbing along empty ridges. You laugh nervously. Everyone does. Then you check your tent ropes twice and wedge a rock under your pillow. That night, the wind picks up. It whistles like a flute through the tent seams, and you sleep with your scarf over your mouth to keep out the sand. It doesn't help much. You wake every hour, blinking gritty tears and wondering if that creaking noise was a tent pole, or something else. By morning, the sky is bruised purple. A sandstorm rolls in with no warning, snarling out of the west like an angry god. You scramble to help secure the packs, but visibility drops fast. Within minutes, the world becomes nothing but swirling, stinging dust. You grab the reins of Jinzhao, who for once seems more terrified than smug, and squat down behind a low wall of supplies. You sit like that for over an hour, wrapped in a blanket, eyes barely open, listening to the wind scream and batter the world. Every now and then you hear a shouted command or the thud of a toppled crate. One of the traders starts singing a lullaby, not loudly, but enough to remind you there are people all around, each holding fast in the storm. When it finally clears, the world has shifted. Dunes rearrange themselves, tents torn or buried, but no one's missing. Somehow, everyone made it through. Jinzhao looks at you with something almost like respect. Then he sneezes in your face. As you resume your journey, you pass what looks like a half-buried wall jutting from the sand. A fragment of ancient Lulan, maybe. It's just sandstone now, worn to a whisper. But there's something eerie about how it stands against the wind, as if waiting for the next traveler to listen. By sunset, you reach a functioning oasis. Real water, cool and running, framed by poplars that rustle like 1,000 tiny hands clapping. You drop to your knees and splash your face, grateful not to be a ghost story yourself. And just as you think about rest, a boy appears with a small scroll in his hands, addressed to no one, sealed with wax, stamped in the shape of a crescent moon. It's written in an unfamiliar script. The monk takes it, frowns, and says one word: Sogdiana. You're heading northwest now, into merchant kingdoms, spice bazaars, and political chessboards dressed in silk. The desert may not have taken you, but the games of men might. Better get some sleep. The sun crawls up the edge of the world as you break camp, joints aching and throat still scratchy with the ghost of yesterday's sandstorm. But now the land begins to shift. The endless dunes of the Taklamakan recede behind you, replaced by dry plains and distant jagged hills. Somewhere up ahead lies Sogdiana, a place that smells like cardamom and cooked deals, and where a smile can hide 3 different intentions. You're moving into the ancient territory of the Sogdians, famed middlemen of the Silk Road, those sleek traders who dealt in everything from silk and spices to secrets and stolen gods. Their cities were bright little jewels in the dust. Samarkand, Bukhara, Panjikent, names that still sound like a drumbeat across history. Here, merchants speak 5 languages and count in 4 currencies before breakfast. And if you blink, you'll miss the detail that matters most. As your caravan approaches one such Sogdian outpost, you notice the difference immediately. The gate is flanked not by guards, but by children selling dates on sticks and bracelets made of polished seeds. Inside, it's chaos wrapped in perfume. The air is thick with frankincense, body odor, and the sudden sweetness of dried mango. Here's where the Silk Road feels alive, not as a route, but as a pulsing, wheeling, breathing beast. Bright fabrics flap in the wind, spices are piled in pyramids, and one stall is literally on fire. Though whether that's on purpose or not is unclear. The woman running it is laughing, so you assume it's fine. Your task today is simple: restock. Trade the now sun-warped goods from Xi'an, spools of silk, lacquer boxes, jade trinkets, for a sturdier fare. You need wool cloaks, brass cooking pots, dried figs, And if you're lucky, a pillow that doesn't smell like camel dreams. You walk the bazaar half dazed by the color alone. Turquoise tiles, red banners, gold-threaded scarves. And then there's the noise, haggling, laughing, the clang of ironwork, and somewhere, someone playing a flute just slightly off-key. You wonder if it's the same guy from Xi'an. You also consider strangling him with his own scarf. You stop at a stall run by a woman named Tarsa, who wears coins in her hair and a grin that could bankrupt a small kingdom. She offers you a pouch of sumac and a mysterious powder she claims will keep camels from biting. You buy both. Jin Zhao glares at you like he knows what's coming. As evening falls, you're invited to dine with a Sogdian noble family. They claim it's hospitality, but you know there's always a motive. Still, refusing would be rude. Or worse, suspicious. So you go, stomach rumbling, boots freshly brushed, wearing a robe you haven't washed since Dunhuang. You hope the spices cover the musk. Their home is a maze of rooms cooled by shaded courtyards. You're seated on embroidered cushions beside a fountain that burbles like a content cat. Dishes arrive in waves, rice soaked in saffron, lamb grilled with apricots, flatbread crisp and flecked with char. The wine is sweet, the talk sweeter. But the host, an older man with clever eyes and henned fingers, keeps circling the conversation back to Roman glass. Specifically, whether you've seen any, whether you have any, whether you're sure. You lie well. You can laugh as you do it. You've learned the trick. Never give a Sogdian a straight answer unless you want to be out-traded so hard your descendants owe interest. Later, in a quieter corner of the house, you come across a room lined with scrolls. Not Buddhist sutras or Confucian texts, but Greek philosophy, translated into Sogdian. One scroll bears a side note. Some say Aristotle knew nothing of camels. I disagree. You laugh too loudly. A servant passing by raises an eyebrow. Historians still argue whether Sogdiana was a cultural melting pot or a marketplace disguised as one. But here, among the scrolls and the smells and the smirking hosts, it's clear. It was both. The Sogdians didn't just pass goods westward. They translated them, rebranded them, even repackaged ideas like optimism and architecture. Ever heard of Zoroastrian fire temples with Greek columns? You will now. You sleep that night under a carved wooden ceiling, lulled by the buzz of night markets, and a flute playing something suspiciously familiar. You dream of fire altars and silver coins with lions on one side and smiling lies on the other. But the morning brings news. The route ahead is blocked, flooding near the Oxus River. Detour time. Your caravan leader, Madame Wei, negotiates quickly, efficiently, and with a vocabulary that makes even the Sogdians flinch. Within hours, a new path is chosen, one that skirts the northern edge of the Pamir Mountains. On your way out of the city, you pass a crumbling old Zoroastrian shrine, its eternal flame flickering low in the wind. You toss a date pit into the brazier for luck. The wind rises as you leave Sogdiana behind, carrying with it the scent of spices and old bargains. You're climbing, now, into the roof of the world. You wake up shivering under a thin blanket that feels about as warm as a wet scarf. Your breath comes out in white puffs, and your eyelashes feel frozen together. Welcome to the Pamir Mountains, the jagged, snow-streaked spine of Central Asia that cradles the sky and smirks at your weakness. The locals call it the Bam-i-Dunya, the roof of the world, and you believe it. You've climbed steadily since leaving the silk-laden bazaars of Sogdiana, and now the terrain has shifted to stone and silence. The trees are thinning. The rivers freeze by noon. Even Jinzhou is quieter now, trudging carefully with wide-set hooves that crunch over frost-covered gravel. This route isn't common, but it isn't forgotten either. The Pamirs have always been a difficult but vital link in the Silk Road, an ancient artery connecting China to Persia and beyond. Historians still argue whether this route was used by royal envoys, rogue merchants, or desperate souls avoiding border taxes. You suspect it was all three, and possibly one amateur musician with a death wish. The caravan shrinks as the path narrows. What was once a wide line of bustling travelers is now a single-file trail hugging cliffs that drop into fog-choked gorges. One misplaced boot and gravity becomes your final trade partner. You try not to look down or up. Honestly, just look at your feet. That's safest. By midday, the cold gives way to wind, and the wind gives way to rumors. One of the guards, he claims to be from Balk, but he's probably just from a place with fewer questions, starts talking about the golden men who live high in these mountains. Tall, he says, with ears so big they can wrap them around their bodies like cloaks. You laugh, no one else does. The monk just nods slowly and says, "They guard the soundless pass." Oh, great. You make camp on a narrow ledge near a trickling spring. The fire is weak, made from dung and wind-snapped twigs, and the tea tastes like regret. But the stars? The stars are absurd. So close it feels like you could pluck one out of the sky and warm your hands with it. There's a moment just before you drift off, when the wind drops. And in that strange silence, you swear you hear bells, faint, high-pitched, and moving fast. Someone jokes about wild marmots pulling ghost sleds. You don't laugh this time. You clutch your blanket tighter. The next day, a snow squall ambushes you halfway through a high pass. Visibility goes from see your shadow to see your soul. You can't tell where the mountain ends and the sky begins. You press forward anyway, one foot in front of the other, rope tied from your waist to the person ahead. It's tense, slow, and so quiet that the sound of your heartbeat feels like an alarm bell. When the storm clears, you're greeted by a frozen lake so still it reflects the clouds like a mirror. The locals call it Zorkul, and legend says a king once drowned his regrets in it. You believe it. It's got that haunted stillness, like it knows too many secrets. Nearby, carved into a cliff, is an inscription in an unfamiliar script. Karosti, maybe. The monk squints at it and mutters something about a forgotten traveler leaving behind poetry no one can read. You wonder if your name will ever be on a wall like that. Hopefully not as a warning. By late afternoon, the air warms slightly as you descend. You pass a narrow valley dotted with stone cairns, little stacks placed by previous travelers. Some have feathers tucked into them. One has a child's doll, its face smoothed by time. You add a smooth pebble to the pile. No one asks why. Later, as you trudge along a ridgeline, you spot movement above. A silhouette darting across a snowfield, a snow leopard. It pauses just long enough to look back at you with eyes that could slice through bone. Then it vanishes into rock, gone. You blink, and it's as if it never existed. Snow leopards are rare, almost mythic. They're said to be omens of endurance, or of being watched by gods. Either way, you feel slightly more alive now. Also colder. Definitely colder. By the time you reach a lower camp nestled between red cliffs, you're exhausted. The air here smells like wild thyme and old stone. There's a tiny shrine set against the rock, filled with offerings, bits of cloth, coins, a silver pin, a half-eaten apple. A man from the caravan kneels to light incense. You follow suit, mostly out of respect, partially out of paranoia. That night, dinner is a stew made from something four-legged and unidentifiable. It's chewy and spicy and feels like a warm punch to the chest. You're grateful for it, even if you think it blinked at you once. Around the fire, the group finally lets down its guard a bit. Stories spill out like wine. A merchant once tricked a prince by dressing as a monk, a camel that refused to carry anything but saffron, a cursed flute that plays itself at night. You almost forget the cold. Almost. In the quiet after, you ask one of the traders why he keeps coming back through the Pamirs. He looks at you for a long time before answering. Because this road reminds you what it costs and what it's worth. The next morning, the trail veers southwest, winding toward lower altitudes and greener lands. Your legs ache, your lips are cracked, but your lungs feel clearer than they ever have. As you cross a narrow bridge of woven rope, shaking slightly with each step, you glance back. The peaks rise behind you like watchful giants, their tips lost in cloud and memory. Ahead lies the ancient land of Persia, where thrones gleam and suspicion is served with every cup of tea. And for the first time in days, you can smell roses on the wind. You step into Persia like someone stepping into a dream, made of silk and shadow. The air is warmer now, tinged with rosewater, spice smoke, and just a whisper of arrogance. The kind of arrogance that only comes from a place that once ruled half the known world and still remembers every detail. The road curls into the Khorasan region, fringed with low hills and valleys glowing with fields of saffron. Farmers work the land with oxen yoked like slow, resigned gods, and the caravan winds through clusters of villages where children wave and beg for dried figs. You pass beneath a stone arch, cracked but still standing. The remnants of the Achaemenid Empire maybe, or the Parthians. Historians still argue whether this particular archway belonged to a noble's estate or an old postal station on the royal road. You try not to trip on the past as you walk through it. Your first major stop in Persia is near the ruins of Persepolis, once the heart of the Achaemenid world, and now just columns rising like tired teeth from the earth. You glimpse it from a distance, stark, sun-bleached pillars, scattered lion carvings, a platform built for kings who thought themselves immortal. You don't stop, not yet. The caravan has other business first. You're led instead to a nearby satrap's estate, part fortress, part garden, and entirely confusing in its design. High sandstone walls draped in flowering vines, rooms cooled by channels of flowing water, and guards who smile only when they're checking your bags. You're here to pay respects. Or rather, your caravan leader is. Madame Wei pulls a lacquered box from the deepest pack, inside a rare green tea wrapped in silk and sealed with beeswax. This, apparently, is your ticket to not being taxed into the next dynasty. The satrap himself arrives wearing a robe that looks spun from starlight. He doesn't walk so much as float, with a half smile like he's permanently 5 steps ahead of every conversation. His beard is oiled, his hands covered in rings, his voice sounds like velvet that's judged you. And you haven't even said hello. The tea is accepted. The satrap nods. Negotiations begin. In the meantime, you're ushered into a shaded courtyard with other travelers, offered dates stuffed with almonds, and a cold drink flavored with cucumber and crushed mint. You suspect you're being buttered up. You let it happen. While Madame Wei haggles over tariffs, you explore the estate's outer gardens. There's a small menagerie, falcons, an irritable donkey, and one very bored cheetah chained to a pillar. A eunuch with more eyeliner than sense introduces himself as Ashem, your assigned guest experience facilitator. He insists on giving you a tour while holding a feather fan he uses more for flair than function. Here we have the water mirrors, he says, gesturing toward a reflecting pool. They calm the mind, unless you're already neurotic. Then they just show you your own stress. You nod politely. He offers you a pomegranate. You accept, then realize too late that eating it will ruin your only clean shirt. Lunch is served in a shaded colonnade, grapes the size of your thumb, yogurt cooled in clay jars, lamb so tender it might apologize when you cut it. You're seated next to a Persian scholar named Dariush, who teaches astronomy by day and writes poetry by moonlight. He tells you the story of how King Darius once consulted stars before battle, only to lose anyway, because he trusted them without understanding them. Later, Darius shows you a tablet etched with Avestan script, part of a Zoroastrian hymn. He explains the tension between the old religion and newer ideas, and how some still believe fire temples should be guarded by silence and dogs. Historians still debate, he says, whether the fire is sacred because it is eternal, or because it is hard to control. That night, the satrap throws a small party in your caravan's honor. By small, he means 50 people and a dancing bear. You spend most of the evening trying to avoid eye contact with a young noblewoman who keeps asking if you're from the empire where people eat soup with sticks. You finally answer yes. She laughs and tells you you're charming. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a death sentence. The wine flows. A harpist plays something melancholic. Ashem gets into an argument with a poet about the moon's emotional influence. Jinzhao tries to eat someone's turban. You drag him away before international relations are destroyed. You sleep in a guest room with floors tiled in lapis and a ceiling painted like the night sky. It's beautiful. It's also slightly off. Orion's belt is upside down. You spend too long staring at it before passing out. By morning, Madame Wei has closed the deal. Fewer taxes, safe passage papers, and a promise of additional guards for the next stretch of road. The satrap, satisfied, gives you a parting gift, a vial of rose oil, allegedly distilled from petals picked at dawn by blindfolded virgins. You suspect it's just expensive perfume, but it smells like longing, so you keep it. As the caravan rolls west again, you pass a group of fire worshippers tending a flickering flame in a small shrine. One of them locks eyes with you and murmurs something in Avestan. Daryush translates. He says the road watches back. You don't reply. You're too busy thinking about how many eyes you've passed already. As the shadows grow long and the heat softens into a golden haze, you leave behind the satrap's estate, the columns of Persepolis, and the weight of too many empires. The Dead Sea lies far ahead, and between here and there, dust, detours, and decisions. And maybe, just maybe, a scroll older than any kingdom. The road west hums beneath your boots now, an ever-droning whisper of carts, wind, and the constant creak of overloaded camels. You've left behind the fragrant opulence of Persia's courts and slipped into lonelier lands, where oasis towns dot the vastness like candle flames on a long black table. Ahead of you lies the Levant, and beyond that, the Dead Sea. But you're not rushing. The desert insists on slowness. It humbles every traveler the same way, blistered feet, scorched lips, and the sneaking suspicion that you're being watched by something older than weather. The terrain grows harder, drier. You pass through a few border outposts, mud brick settlements where Roman guards eye your caravan with practiced boredom. They wear armor that clinks even when they sigh. One has a lazy eye and a spear taller than Jin Zhao. You try not to make any sudden movements. The locals call this region a crossroads of gods, where Egyptian, Hebrew, Persian, and Roman spirits all share the same sky and argue about the rent. Shrines pop up everywhere, tiny stone altars to forgotten deities, burnt offerings scattered like breadcrumbs to the divine. At one point, you pass a ruined Nabatean temple, its entrance half buried in sand. The monk insists on stopping. Inside, you find faded wall carvings, camels with wings, a woman with 3 eyes, and a star that seems to pulse even in the dark. Historians still argue whether this site marked a holy pilgrimage route or just a really ambitious trade hub, he mutters. Either way, you light a lamp, leave a coin, and walk out with your skin crawling slightly. The heat climbs. Your lips crack. Your fingernails gather dust that refuses to leave. And still, the desert pulls you forward. One evening, just past a dried-out well where the water tastes faintly of regret, you arrive at a tiny oasis town. It's barely a smudge on your map, a village called Ain Jalut, nestled between crumbling cliffs and a marshy trickle of a stream. You stay the night in a low, stone house with the goats in the courtyard and a rooster that sounds like it's learning to scream. Your host is a wrinkled woman named Leah, who cooks lentils with wild herbs and tells stories like she's charging by the syllable. She speaks of a cave nearby where the walls hum when the wind shifts. My great-grandmother said scrolls were hidden there during a war, she says. She also said her cow could do arithmetic, so grain of salt maybe. Still, the monk grows very still at this. The next morning, with Madame Wei's half-nod of permission, you set off to investigate. The cave isn't far, up a ridge, past fig trees twisted into eerie shapes, and through a crack in the cliffside that you only find because a lizard runs across your foot at the right moment. Inside, it's cool, dry, and smells of old stone and older stories. You light a small oil lamp. The flame flickers across walls marked with soot and finger smears. No scrolls, no treasure. But as you move deeper, you find something. A clay jar, wedged into a hollow, sealed with wax and wrapped in oilcloth. Your hands tremble. You break the seal. Inside is a bundle of parchment. Fragile, faded. Letters in Aramaic or something close. The monk's eyes go wide. This could be from the Qumran era, he whispers. Could be connected to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Then in the same breath, could also be a grocery list. Either way, the jar is packed carefully and hidden in the caravan's deepest crate, just in case. When you return to camp, Leah offers you a carved amulet, an eye surrounded by waves. Protection, she says. Not from evil, from your own luck. You thank her. You don't ask what that means. Some answers you let hang. A few days later, the desert opens into a shimmering salt basin. Flat, blinding white, and eerily still. Still, you've reached the Dead Sea, the lowest point on Earth, where the air feels heavier. The sky somehow farther away, and the water thick. You walk to the edge and dip your hand in. It's slick, almost oily, and stings the tiny cuts on your fingers. Nothing lives in it. Not fish, not algae, not even whispers. Your caravan stops here to rest. Some bathe, floating like fallen leaves, giggling nervously. You just stare at the hills across the water, ancient Judean cliffs scorched with history. Somewhere nearby is the fortress of Masada, where rebels once stood against Rome. The monk points it out, eyes distant. Some say the desert remembers the screams. Others say it only remembers the silence after. You don't speak for a while after that. That night, camp is quiet. Fires flicker low. A Roman traveler, you're not sure if he's a soldier or a spy, shares figs soaked in honey and tells you he's headed to Alexandria. Word is something's happening at the library, he mutters. Books vanishing, or being locked away. You perk up. Books? Vanishing? Sounds like the kind of mystery worth chasing. Madam Wei agrees the next morning. The southern road curves toward Egypt, and there's always demand for scrolls, spices, and rumors. Before leaving, you carve your initials into a smooth stone and leave it near the salt-crusted shore. Just 3 letters. No explanation. The Dead Sea keeps no secrets, but it keeps everything else. The path to Alexandria is long, hot, and weirdly quiet. You cross through Sinai, past scattered nomads who sell camel milk and blessings in equal measure. Sand gives way to rock. Then to marshy deltas where the reeds rustle like gossip. The Nile winds nearby like a lazy dragon, glinting in patches through date palms and papyrus thickets. The closer you get to Alexandria, the more everything changes. Language, clothing, food, even the air. It smells like salt, ink, and old ambition. People speak in a tumble of Greek, Coptic, Arabic, and Latin, their hands painting stories faster than their mouths can keep up. And then one afternoon it simply appears. Alexandria, rising from the haze like a promise. White limestone buildings spill toward the sea, tall columns spear the sky. Boats crowd the harbor like bees around a hive, their sails embroidered with strange sigils and louder colors. Seagulls shriek, fishermen shout. Somewhere someone is arguing with a goat. You've arrived. The caravan breaks apart here. Some traders heading south to Thebes, others planning to ship wares to Rome. You linger. Alexandria is too loud to ignore, too full of corners that whisper, "Stay a while." You unload your cargo in the eastern port, bartering silk for bundles of parchment and cedar oil. The dockmaster, a one-eyed man who smells like clams and authority, demands 3 forms of identification. You hand him tea and a compliment. It works. You find a room above a baker's shop. The walls are thin, the bread is heavenly, and your window opens onto a street where cats rule and people obey. At night, the city hums like a beast purring in its sleep. And you're here for one thing. The library. Yes, that library. The Library of Alexandria. The one whispered about in every corner of the Silk Road. Scholars speak of it like a lost heaven. Historians still argue whether it truly held every book ever written, or if that's just romantic myth. But one thing's clear. Knowledge lived here. And some say it still does. You visit on a Thursday. Why Thursday? Because the baker said that's when the guards are sleepier. And who are you to argue with a woman who can make bread cry tears of joy? The library building was massive. Only parts remain now: earthquakes, fires, politics. Take your pick. But some inner chambers still stand. Vaulted rooms of marble, walls lined with scroll niches, floors inlaid with patterns so intricate you trip just staring at them. You aren't alone. Other travelers roam these halls. Some scholars hunched and muttering in tongues older than ink. Others, less official, scan the walls with greedy eyes. One man in a black robe watches you too long. You duck behind a column. A young guide with ink-stained hands offers to show you around. She doesn't ask for money, just stories. You trade her one about the golden men of the Pamirs, and in return, she shows you a hidden alcove. Scrolls in Syriac, Sanskrit, and Demotic, bound not in thread, but with beeswax seals. She taps one gently. "This one," she whispers. mentions an island that dreams of the moon. You don't know what that means. You don't ask. That night, in a wine shop built from stones taken from old shrines, you sit across from a merchant who deals in contraband knowledge. He has a scar running from lip to ear and fingers covered in ink tattoos. You want something real? He asks. Something not meant for trade? You nod slowly. He produces a fragment of a scroll, written in Phoenician. It tells of a ship that sailed west from Carthage, carrying scrolls banned in Rome, books on time, death, and languages that predate sound. Whether it's true or a sales pitch, you can't tell, but you buy it anyway. Some things are worth the gamble. Days blur in Alexandria. You visit the Serapeum, where philosophers once shouted at gods, and climb the stairs of the Pharaoh's lighthouse, dizzy with salt wind and the sense that you're being watched by history itself. And then it happens. One afternoon, as you sip mint tea near the bazaar, a rumor spreads like fire in dry grass. The library is being emptied. Some say it's the priests, others say Roman officials. Some claim it's a controlled preservation effort. Everyone's nervous. Everyone's grabbing what they can. You rush back, pushing through crowds of scholars, tourists, and pickpockets. Inside the library, you find scrolls bundled in haste, packed into crates, sealed with wax that hasn't dried. The girl with ink-stained fingers is crying. "They're taking them away," she says. "Not burning, hiding them, locking them up where no one will ever read them again." You help her pack. You don't ask where they're going, she doesn't say. But before you leave, you steal something small, a page fallen behind a cabinet. It's crumpled, faded, but legible. A recipe for indigo dye. Not world-changing, not dangerous. But it's yours now. A sliver of Alexandria, that history forgot to erase. You leave the city at dusk, walking beside the Nile one last time. The sun sets in gold and flame, birds roost, cats prowl, and behind you, the library breathes its last. The road ahead leads to Rome. Time to see how the other half collapses. You arrive in Rome on a morning so bright it feels rude. The sky is a clean, cutting blue, the kind of blue that makes you squint before your second breath. The kind of blue that says, "This city has survived more empires than you've had bad hair days." The journey from Alexandria took weeks, winding up through coastal ports, dusty Italian roads, and far too many tolls where guards insisted on inspection and then forgot what they were looking for halfway through their fourth fig. But here you are, Roma, Caput Mundi, the Eternal City, and true to its name, it's everything all at once. Marble and sweat, incense and fish guts, grandeur and rot. The forum bustles with senators in white togas arguing over grain prices, while 10 feet away, someone sells grilled mice on a stick. You pass under an archway built by Augustus, so wide you could drive a chariot team through it sideways, and so detailed it feels like it was carved yesterday. You pause at the Pantheon, the great dome gazing upward like it's trying to make eye contact with the gods. But the moment that strikes you most is quieter. A man sweeping the steps of a temple, whistling off-key, waving you by like you're already late for something important. You're not just here to gawk, though. Madame Wei has business. Rome is a hub of buyers, and the caravan's goods. Persian spices, Central Asian jade, Chinese silk, even a suspiciously plump jar of honey that might actually be opium. Are worth their weight in influence. You're lodged in a villa just outside the Aventine Hill, in a quiet suburb where birdsong mixes with philosophical arguments and the smell of overcooked lentils. Your host, Lucius Vero, is a middle-tier senator with too many opinions and not enough hair. Lucius greets you in an open courtyard with orange trees and a very wet dog. His handshake is dry. His jokes, unfortunately, are not. "I hope you brought better wine than the Persians last month," he says. I still can't feel my eyebrows. He hosts a dinner party that night, not a bacchanal. Those are for spring. This is more of a politely competitive bragfest. You recline on a couch while slaves bring platters of oysters, stuffed dormice, honeyed pine nuts, and so many types of cheese that you briefly consider founding a religion around them. Across from you sits a woman named Claudia. who claims to write poetry, but might also work for the emperor. You can't tell. She speaks in half-riddles and compliments so backhanded they leave bruises. "So," she says, sipping wine so weak it might be juice, "you've come all the way from the east. Did you bring enlightenment or just more silk?" You smile and say, "Neither. I brought gossip." That gets a laugh, and an invitation to her private library. Later, in her villa overlooking the Tiber River, she shows you scrolls with maps drawn in red ink, rumors of Germanic tribes moving south, and one very crude drawing of what she swears is a Chinese dragon. You think it looks like a snake having an identity crisis. She also shows you a small carved idol, wrapped in silk, an Egyptian cat goddess, stolen or liberated, depending on the politics of the moment. "Rome wants the world," she whispers, and it collects by curiosity as much as by conquest. The days blur into politics and parades. You see the Colosseum, where games are in session. Lions, acrobats, a comedy troupe from Gaul who tell jokes about taxes and are probably under surveillance. You overhear senators debating grain tariffs, and nearby, a boy sells lead curse tablets guaranteed to make your enemies stub their toes. You buy 3, just in case. Then one evening, the wind changes. You feel it first in your teeth, a dryness, a silence between bird calls. You see it next, dark shapes on the northern horizon. Not clouds, riders, Goths. The rumors have been circling for weeks, but now they ride close. Some say it's Alaric himself, leading a march on the Eternal City. Historians still argue whether Rome's slow crumble began with sword or spreadsheet, but it doesn't matter to you now. Madame Wei decides it's time to move. You help pack in the dead of night, scrolls into oilskins, silk into hidden compartments. The opium honey gets buried in a box labeled dried figs. Jin Zhao tries to bite a senator. You don't stop him. You slip out of Rome at dawn. The city glows behind you, golden and indifferent. The aqueducts rise like ribs across the hills, still carrying water as if empires never died. You ride with a smaller group now, headed southeast, through olive groves and crumbling villas, past fountains clogged with ivy and markets still pretending things are fine. Claudia sends you off with a scroll wrapped in a riddle. Lucius sends wine. Neither will write. As you camp that night in the shadow of an abandoned watchtower, a storm rolls in from the west. You huddle near the fire, the wind heavy with ashen whispers. Rome was never eternal. It just knew how to pretend. Rain drums your hood like impatient fingers as you flee south, the sky cracked wide and leaking. The road beneath your feet is Roman-built, impossibly straight, paved with ancient ambition, and now slick with the leftovers of empire. You've left the city behind. Rome, once the center of everything, now feels like a beautiful corpse dressed in gold. The whispers of invasion aren't whispers anymore. They're hoofbeats in the distance. Your route takes you along the Via Appia, the queen of roads, stretching from Rome all the way down to Brundisium. You pass milestones etched with Latin you can barely read, each one a reminder that someone long ago believed the future was theirs to shape. Turns out, futures are slippery. The weather worsens. Wind lashes through cypress trees. Travelers on the road are few now, mostly frightened families or traders moving fast and talking little. You spot a group of monks on foot, soaked but serene, chanting beneath their breath. One wears a wooden cross as big as his head. Another carries a piglet wrapped in a shawl. Both seem equally holy. Jin Zhao, of course, hates the rain. He smells like sour rugs and moves like molasses. You try coaxing him with dried dates. He tries biting you again. It's a familiar dance. You reach a small hill town by dusk. High walls, narrow gates, shutters closed tight. The gatekeeper eyes your group suspiciously, but a bribe and a smile get you through. Inside, the tavern is packed. Heat, laughter, the smell of wet wool and cheap garlic stew. There, you meet Alia, the innkeeper's niece, who wears a dagger at her waist and an attitude like armor. She hands you a bowl of lentils and flatbread without asking your name. Later, she tosses you a blanket. "Don't bleed on it," she says. You're not sure if it's a joke. You stay 2 nights while Madame Wei negotiates safe passage through increasingly unstable territories. News trickles in with the rain. Visigoths seen near the coast. Entire villas abandoned. A Roman governor who fled in the night and left his dogs behind. Aelia tells you she once dreamed of visiting Constantinople. Now she just wants her uncle to stop coughing. The town's priest gives a sermon in the square, voice cracking in the wind. He warns of divine punishment, of sin and fire, of barbarians and bad omens. Aelia rolls her eyes. He says that every harvest, she mutters. It's his version of the weather report. On the third morning, you're packing your gear when Aelia presses something into your hand. A tiny silver coin, worn almost smooth. Trade it for luck, she says. Or a better coat. You smile, you don't say goodbye. You descend the hill as the storm breaks. The air smells like olives and wet stone. In the valley below, the road forks. One path toward the coast, one inland. You choose the coast. Soon, the Tyrrhenian Sea appears, gray and heaving. Fishing villages line the shore, boats pulled up far from the tide as if the sea's grown too unpredictable. You spend a few nights in one such town, sleeping in a granary with the grain still inside. You dream of home, though you're not sure which place that means anymore. Then, one morning, you spot smoke on the horizon. Not from hearths, from torches. You climb a ridge to watch. The city of Capua, once a Roman jewel, is burning. You see shapes moving in the streets, hear faint echoes of shouting, maybe laughter. A raven flaps overhead, cawing once, then disappearing into the ash-colored sky. Madame Wei makes the call. You leave fast, cutting through marshland and thistle scrub, avoiding roads, speaking in whispers. The caravan is smaller now. Several traders have peeled off, some just vanished. And yet, the journey continues. At one point, you come across a ruined villa, half collapsed, ivy strangling its columns. Inside, you find mosaics depicting Hercules fighting lions. The ceiling is open to the rain. There's a scroll box tucked into a cracked jar, empty. Someone's beaten you to the prize. Still, you take a bronze hairpin from the floor, not for trade, just to remember that someone once lived here, laughed here, maybe loved here. You camp that night in a sheepfold with no sheep. The stars are gone, hidden behind clouds. You share a flask of warm wine with Madame Wei, who tells you she once traded silk for a goat that turned out to be a magician's assistant. You don't ask follow-up questions. The next morning, a rider approaches, alone, cloaked and shivering. He brings news. A ship waits at a southern port, bound for a Greek island. There's still time to board it if you move fast. Pack, you don't speak. The road is crumbling now. Empire, memory maps. As you ride, you pass a statue toppled into weeds. A Roman general, face worn smooth as sword snapped. Someone has painted flowers across his chest. Even monuments want to be remembered differently. The wind smells like salt. The air tastes like endings. You hear the sea before you see it. Waves crash like applause or warnings. Your ship waits beyond the dock, sails furled, wood creaking softly in anticipation. Rome is behind you. But history? It's just getting started again. The deck of the ship sways beneath you like it's trying to remember how to stay still. You grip the railing as the coast shrinks behind you. Italy, Rome, all of it, blurring into a gray smudge under a sky that promises both rain and revelation. The ship is a squat, broad-bellied merchant galley, patched in places with wood from at least 3 other vessels, judging by the inconsistent creaks. It smells of brine, wet rope, and despairing fish. The captain, a woman named Sophia, wears a ring in each ear and curses in 7 languages, sometimes mid-sentence. You're headed east now, across the Ionian Sea, toward the islands of Greece. You think of Homer, of Odysseus, of sunlit olive groves and white stone columns gleaming in moonlight. You also think of seasickness. It turns out Jinzhao does not like boats. He sulks below deck, making angry camel noises and refusing all attempts at comfort. You try feeding him ginger. He spits it back with dramatic flair. The sailors have started betting on how many days until he snaps and jumps overboard. You're not sure if they'd stop him. As the days stretch on, you trade stories with the crew. One sailor shows you a tooth pendant he swears belonged to a siren. Another has a tattoo of a dolphin holding a wine cup. He insists it's religious. You nod slowly. Nights are better. You lie on the upper deck, watching the stars wheel overhead. The sea below glows faintly some nights with bioluminescent plankton, like a spilled constellation. You wonder if the water remembers every ship that ever crossed it. Finally, land appears. An island shaped like a broken harp. This is Rhodes, once home to the Colossus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The statue's long gone, collapsed by earthquake and time, but pieces of its memory remain. You disembark into a harbor flanked by old stone towers and merchants yelling about figs like they're made of gold. You're not staying long, but you restock olives, salted fish, parchment, and a new blanket, because the last one may or may not still smell like Roman goat. Madame Wei trades a bolt of silk for a carved astrolabe used to map the stars. It's cracked, but still works. You test it under the night sky and realize just how far you've come, from Xi'an to here, charted not by compass, but by survival. Your next stop is the coast of Anatolia, then inland, into what used to be Byzantium, or Constantinople, or the Eastern Roman Empire, depending on who's talking. Historians still argue whether Byzantium was truly Roman, or something new wearing Rome's clothes. You decide not to get involved. You land near Ephesus, now a faded gem nestled in hills overgrown with pine. The theater still stands, huge, open, echoing. You sit on a stone bench and listen to the wind carry whispers you can almost translate. Someone once stood here, reciting lines in Greek, maybe Latin, maybe something now forgotten. You spend the night in a monastery perched above the ruins. The monks make cheese that could wake the dead and beer that makes you forget your name. One of them, Brother Andronikos, takes a liking to you. He's a scribe, one of the many keeping the written word alive as empires collapse like sandcastles at high tide. He shows you his workspace, ink pots made from soot and vinegar, quills sharpened from eagle feathers, pages of vellum scraped until translucent. We write what we can, he says, and hope the future finds it. You help him copy a map that night, your hand clumsy but steady. It's a map of trade routes across the known world, from India to Hispania. Your name isn't on it, but your path, you can almost see it traced in the ink's curve. Later, he offers you a small pouch of oak gall ink and a blank sheet of vellum. To remember your way, he says, or to write your own version. The next morning, Madame Wei suggests a detour, north into the mountains of Cappadocia, where travelers carve homes out of stone and monks live in caves painted with saints. You agree. The coast will wait. The road winds upward into a land of fairy chimneys and cliffs that look like sleeping giants. You stay in a cave home carved into pumice, walls blackened with old soot, ceiling low enough to kiss your forehead if you stand up too fast. There's a small church nearby, hidden behind a boulder, its walls still painted with Byzantine frescoes, gold halos, sad-eyed saints, a lion with wings and judgmental eyebrows. A local boy tells you a tale of a cave deeper still, where a scroll is hidden that was never meant to be read aloud. Cursed? You ask. No, he says. Just lonely. You find it the next day, a narrow tunnel behind a crack in the church wall, leading to a chamber no wider than your outstretched arms. Inside, a scroll wrapped in red thread, its script looping like a dancer's footwork. It's written in Syriac, and the monk with you says it's a prayer. Not to God, but to memory itself. You take nothing, you leave a coin, you back out slowly. History. Here isn't loud. It's patient. It waits, buried in ash and silence. You travel east again, through the highlands, where snow still lingers on peaks and goats outnumber people. Jin Zhao seems to like it here. He eats better, bites less. Occasionally lets you scratch behind his ears. By the time you descend into the eastern steppes, you've crossed 2 continents, 3 dead empires, and at least 4 ghost stories. And you still have miles to go, because somewhere out there, beyond the plains and the rivers, is Venice. And Venice owes you a story. The wind changes again as you descend into flatter lands, leaving behind Cappadocia's quiet stone cathedrals, and entering a world that smells of marshes, moss, and opportunity. You ride westward now toward the sea once more, toward Venice, where merchants sleep with ledgers under their pillows, and even the pigeons look like they're running a scam. The approach is not glamorous. Your caravan trudges through low-lying swamps and narrow causeways, wheels churning up muck that smells ancient. The sky is bruised with clouds, and the air is thick with biting midges that have no respect for international travelers. Still, by mid-morning, you spot it. Venice, rising from the water like a trick of the light, all towers and domes, reflections rippling in canals that cut the city into 1,000 whispering pieces. It's unlike anything you've seen. No streets, just waterways, boats instead of wagons, poles instead of reins. Gondoliers with arms like oars shout greetings, or insults hard to tell. Bridges arch like eyebrows across buildings older than your family line. You dock near the Arsenal, the city's shipbuilding quarter, where wood and iron clank day and night. It's loud, busy, and smells like salt and ambition. Madame Wei has business here, and not just silk and spices. Secrets are currency in Venice, and she trades fluently. You're lodged in a merchant's house off the Cannaregio Canal. The room's cramped but richly adorned. Red velvet curtains, brass oil lamps, and a small caged bird that judges you with every blink. The bed creaks. The water below laps softly. And in the morning, the whole house smells like coffee and candle wax. Venice is both beautiful and absurd. One moment you're dazzled by a gold mosaic of the Virgin Mary, the next you're nearly hit by a boat full of goats. You step into St. Mark's Basilica, gaze up at its domes painted with stars, then exit and immediately trip over a man selling counterfeit relics. And yet, it feels oddly familiar. This city is a mirror of everything you've seen. Persian markets in its perfumes, Roman columns in its bones, Eastern silks fluttering from balconies. It is the Silk Road in one chaotic, soggy package. Your main contact here is a glass merchant named Luca di Torre, whose fingers are stained with soot, and who talks like every sentence is a deal. His shop is tucked deep within the Murano district, where flames roar in furnaces behind thick walls and molten glass glows like bottled lightning. Luca's specialty? Secret recipes? He claims to make glass that never breaks, mirrors that reflect your thoughts, and beads that can tell if you're lying. You don't ask for a demonstration. You just help Madame Wei unpack a crate of rare Chinese inkstones and a box of dried rhubarb. In return, Luca grants you access to a locked cabinet. Inside, vials of colored glass powder, books bound in fish skin, and a small box labeled in faded ink. Silicis lucid imperium. Glass that glows. He lets you hold one of the rods. It's faintly warm. When you tilt it, it glimmers faintly in the dark, like moonlight trapped in crystal. Venetian alchemists believe it absorbs memory, Luca says. Not science, not quite sorcery, but it listens. Historians still argue whether Venice's glassblowers were scientists, artists, or wizards with a marketing budget. Whatever they were, their secrets stayed locked on these islands. Any glassblower caught trying to leave was often dissuaded with extreme prejudice. At a tavern one night, you drink sacchetti and sparkling wine with a man who calls himself a naval architect, but smells strongly of secrets. He draws you a map of secret salt routes through the Adriatic and warns you not to trust any gondolier who hums. The humming ones work for the Doge, he whispers, or for the priest, or both. You store the map anyway. Why not? Venice runs on rumor. Still, not everything is whisper and wonder. One morning, as fog rolls over the canals, a bell tolls from the campanile, and word spreads like spilled ink. Plague has returned. Quiet panic follows. Some wear masks, long-nosed, beaked contraptions stuffed with herbs. Others flee. Some pretend nothing's happening. Classic Venetian strategy. You don't wait to see how it ends. You pack quickly. Madame Wei arranges a small boat and a pilot named Alina, who swears she once raced pirates for fun. You're heading southeast, along the Dalmatian coast, bound for Constantinople, or what remains of it. Before you leave, you receive a gift from Luca, a small sphere of red glass, no bigger than a marble. Keep it in firelight, he says. It shows different colors depending on who's watching. You pocket it. You don't ask. As your boat slips out of the Venetian lagoon, the city fades into gold and shadow behind you. Bells toll again. Maybe for the hour, maybe for the dead. You're not sure anymore. The open sea welcomes you with a yawn and a slap of cold spray. The Silk Road doesn't end here. It just turns. And you? You're carrying glass that glows, ink that remembers, and stories you still don't understand. Next stop, the Empire Between Empires, where the East met the West and shook hands while hiding daggers. Constantinople awaits. The Aegean Sea stretches out ahead like a rolling sheet of polished glass, broken only by islands that rise like the backs of sleeping beasts. You're bound for Constantinople, sailing along a coast stitched with myths and moss-covered ruins. Your guide, Alina, steers the boat like she's dancing with it. She never looks nervous, even when the waves slap hard or the wind shifts without warning. She claims she once escaped a pirate ambush by hiding in the belly of a beached whale. You believe her, mostly because she says it while cleaning a dagger with a seashell. You pass the island of Lesbos, where Sappho once wrote poems to the moon. Then Chios, where the air smells like mastic resin and rumors. You dock briefly at a port where the market smells of octopus and ink, and a child offers to sell you a blessing for 1 coin or a curse for 2. You choose the blessing, just to be safe. And then one morning, the city appears. Constantinople, once Byzantium, once Nova Roma, now the shimmering gate between 2 worlds. The sun rises behind it, gilding the domes and towers in molten gold. The Theodosian walls, tall and formidable, stretch like a stone spine along the hills. Even from the harbor you feel it, power, old and layered, like incense burned into cathedral stone. You dock in the Golden Horn, where ships from everywhere jostle for space. Ottoman galleys, Venetian traders, Coptic pilgrims, and a lone boat painted entirely pink for reasons no one will explain. Madame Wei knows people here. Of course she does. You're quickly ushered into the Fenar district, where spice merchants, Armenian scribes, and Turkish bathkeepers share the same alleyways. The streets are narrow and uphill in every direction. Laundry flaps like banners. Children chase chickens. Somewhere, a cat rides a donkey like royalty. Your lodging is inside a tower that leans suspiciously but holds strong. The room smells like lavender soap and damp history. You sleep on a mattress stuffed with wool and old receipts. The ceiling leaks in poetic rhythm. The city is a labyrinth of languages and loyalties. You hear Greek and Arabic, Turkish and Latin, sometimes all in the same sentence. People nod to you knowingly, then sell you things at double price. You feel more like a walking question mark than a person. Your first stop is the Hagia Sophia. You step inside and feel time pause. Its dome, massive, floating, impossible, is painted in faded gold and longing. Light slants through high windows like it's been waiting centuries to do so. Mosaics of Christ and Mary stare from the walls, watching every footstep, every breath. On the floor, tourists whisper, Orthodox priests chant in counterpoint. It feels like standing in the ribcage of something holy that forgot how to die. You sit quietly in the back, next to a blind man selling sandalwood beads. He hums a tune you remember from a Persian inn. You don't ask how he knows it. You just listen. Outside, you're dragged, politely, into a tea house by a merchant named Eunice, who insists you try say, and something he calls figs of persuasion. He knows Madame Wei, speaks 10 words of Mandarin, and 20 in a dialect of Uzbek that nobody's heard since the Mongols left. He offers to trade you a scroll of Byzantine astronomy for one of your Persian coins. Not because I need it, he says, but because it's old enough to remember better stories. You make the deal. The scroll smells like cedar and is marked with star paths and warnings. Do not chart Mars on a Thursday. Noted. Later, you're invited to a private bazaar hidden behind a crumbling aqueduct. There, beneath oil lamps and velvet curtains, merchants whisper of forbidden books, Ottoman relics, and tulip bulbs that supposedly bloom only under moonlight. One man offers you a quill made from a phoenix feather. Another shows you a mirror that fogs in the presence of liars. You buy a compass made from bone and amber. It doesn't point north, but it does hum softly when you face east. That night, you attend a dinner hosted by a noble family descended from both Byzantine emperors and Ottoman viziers. Their house is filled with books, silk wall hangings, and peacocks that walk like they own the calendar. You try not to trip on a feathered tail. During the meal, a scholar named Salim tells you about a manuscript recently discovered beneath the cisterns. It's written in a language no one can read, with illustrations of flowers that don't exist. Some say it's a lost herbal guide, he whispers. Others say it's a spell book for calming cities. You don't know which is more unbelievable, book, or the idea of calming a city like this. You ask if you can see it. He smiles. The next morning, he takes you through winding alleys to a basement beneath an old hammam. There, among crates and scroll racks, he unwraps it. Faded green leather, pages delicate as breath, symbols curl like vines. Flowers burst with impossible geometry. One sketch looks eerily like Jin Zhao, though with wings. You blink. He doesn't. You don't take it. Some things aren't yours to carry. You leave Constantinople a few days later, boarding a riverboat bound for the Black Sea. The city disappears behind you like a sigh, all domes and smoke, laughter and unreadable texts. You carry with you a scroll of stars, a compass that hums, and the heavy knowledge that you've stood at the hinge of history. Next comes the journey through the steppes, across the bones of forgotten khans, and under skies so wide they crush your thoughts into whispers. The road still stretches. The story still spins. You're not done, not even close. You awaken to a sky so big it feels like it might swallow you whole. The steppes of Central Asia unfold in every direction. Flat, endless, gold-tinged grasslands rippling under the morning wind like a silk banner stretching from horizon to horizon. The boat from Constantinople dropped you near the delta of the Danube, and from there, you joined a small caravan snaking eastward, back into the open wild. Gone are the crowded cities and marble columns. Now it's just wind, hooves, and the sound of your own breath. A few yurts dot the landscape like accidental thoughts. The sun scorches by day, freezes by night, and forgets entirely what moderation means. You're in the shadow of the old Silk Road again, but here, it's less road and more suggestion. Faint tracks worn by traders, herders, and horsemen long gone. It's said that every patch of earth here holds at least one broken arrow, one forgotten name, and a secret that still waits to be told. You ride with a group of Tatar traders, their carts rattling with bronze tools, bundles of dyed wool, and more sheep than you can count. Their leader, Bitar, is a man with a laugh so loud it scares crows. He teaches you how to drink kumis, fermented mare's milk that tastes like a dare. You try not to cry. One night, he shows you a Mughal coin he wears on a leather cord. My grandfather says it came from a prince who crossed this land riding a zebra. He grins. It probably wasn't a zebra, but it makes a better story. You camp in shallow valleys dotted with wildflowers and rust-colored stones. The food is simple: meat, milk, flatbread cooked on hot rocks. You eat with your hands. You sleep under the stars, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, the fabric still warm from someone else's life. You begin to notice the sky changes faster here. Clouds move like dancers. The stars spin lower. You see constellations you don't recognize. Animals with too many legs, kings with no crowns. One evening, a storm rolls in. Not rain, dust and thunder, clouds of earth lifted into the air like the steppes themselves are trying to leave. The traders form a circle, tightening ropes, covering the goods, crouching together. You ride it out half blind, dust in your teeth, your eyes, your lungs. Jin Zhao curls into himself like a lump of grumpy clay. When it passes, everything is coated in a thin film of beige. You taste it for days. But that night, the stars return clearer than ever. Batar points out a comet, a long white smear across the black, and says it's the tail of a dragon trying to escape fate. Sometimes, he says, fate holds tighter. In the coming days, you pass hilltop graves, stone circles with carved deer, ancient burial mounds no taller than your shoulder. The monk with you whispers that these are sky burials, meant to lift the soul into the wind. Historians still argue whether these people worshipped the sky itself, or just feared being forgotten. You leave behind a stone offering. Something small, personal. The broken bone compass from Venice. You figure it might work better up there. Eventually, the caravan reaches the fringes of Mughal territory. Not the empire at its peak, but its distant echo, where old traditions cling like moss to history. You're taken in by a merchant family in Agra, who receive you with cautious hospitality. Their courtyard is filled with peacocks, their plumage so brilliant you forget what dirt looks like. You sleep in a room with lattice windows that throw patterns on your skin as you lie awake, listening to the murmured rhythm of late, night prayers. Agra itself pulses with memory. You walk through its winding streets, where Persian gardens tangle with Indian color, and domed tombs sit like forgotten lullabies. The Taj Mahal is nearby, and you glimpse it in the distance, a pale blur of perfection rising from mist. A guide offers to take you inside for a price. You decline. Some things are meant to be seen from just far enough away to stay magical. At the Mughal market, you barter for sandalwood beads, saffron-stained robes, and a box of palm leaves that a toothless old man swears can make you forget your oldest regret. You chew one. You remember everything more vividly. You don't ask for a refund. You're here for more than trade, though. You've been tasked with delivering something. That old red-threaded scroll you found beneath a church in Cappadocia. It's wrapped carefully now, hidden inside a book of poetry, and meant for a scholar named Mirza. He's hard to find, but when you do, he lives in a quiet courtyard, with a parrot who recites poetry and insults in equal measure. Mirza takes the scroll, unwraps it slowly, then exhales like he's been holding his breath for 20 years. He doesn't explain. He just nods once and offers you tea. That night, he lets you sleep on his roof, beneath a tapestry of stars and moonlight. The parrot swears at the wind. You fall asleep with jasmine in your nose, and the sound of a sitar drifting across the rooftops. In the morning, you're already moving again. You ride east toward Delhi, then northward, skirting the lower slopes of the Himalayas. The land is changing again. Tighter forests, colder mornings, birds with cries you've never heard before. Somewhere ahead lies the Brahmaputra River, then the winding roads back toward Tibet and western China. You're not looping back the way you came. You're carving a new arc, a wider circle, through lands that never stop dreaming. Jinzhao grunts, as if annoyed you've figured that out. The sun rises, and the path gleams like a ribbon of possibility. You ride now through a place where the land and the sky blur together, and every breath feels like it's been filtered through ancient stone and melting snow. This is the Himalayan fringe, the shoulder of the world's tallest spine, where rivers run clear as glass and monks walk barefoot through snow without flinching. You follow pilgrim paths carved long before emperors had names, moving eastward along ridges that cut clouds in half. Your caravan is smaller now, just a handful of traders, the monk who never stops muttering in his sleep, and, of course, Jinzhao, who's taken to chewing on icicles and glaring at yaks. Your goal lies far ahead, the Forbidden City, deep in Ming China. But before you can get there, you must wind through jungles, river deltas, and rain-slicked mountain passes, each step stranger than the last. You descend from rocky heights into a world dripping with green, Assam, or somewhere near it. The air is wet velvet, thick with the smell of orchids, wet bark, and spice. You hear insects louder than your thoughts, frogs that sound like drums, and parrots that scream like toddlers with strong opinions. You rest in a bamboo hut built on stilts, where geckos live in the rafters and raindrops tap out lullabies on the thatch. A tea farmer offers you a drink brewed from wild leaves, so bitter it makes your spine whistle, but so rich it feels like a poem in your mouth. Downriver, in a floating village where houses bob gently like sleeping turtles, you meet a boat merchant who deals in junks, flat-bottomed ships that resemble water-striding insects with ambitions. He shows you one bound north toward the Yangtze. Madam Wei makes arrangements. You load up again. You drift through delta wetlands, where water buffalo blink slowly in flooded fields, and rice paddies mirror the sky. The river smells of silt and secrets. You pass other junk stacked with ceramics, fireworks, and eels, their captains waving as if they've seen you before. Maybe they have. Maybe you're just starting to look like a legend. At one port, you're offered a bowl of soup containing something that looks like it used to fly and might still be trying. You eat it anyway. It makes you dream of red lanterns and dragons with familiar eyes. You move inland once again, crossing bridges made of woven root, winding through towns filled with red gates and street poets who write haiku for a coin and a compliment. One hands you this. Silk unravels slow, but memory spins faster. don't sleep through your name. You write it down. You still don't know why. And then, one pale dawn, you see it, rising in the morning fog like the palace of a dream half remembered, the Forbidden City. Its walls stretch in perfect symmetry, each line carved with divine intention. The roofs are glazed in golden yellow, the color of emperors, the color of dawn. Dragons coil at every corner, watching, waiting. Inside, everything breathes control. Courtyards so clean you feel guilty walking across them. Stone lions that snarl with frozen breath. Officials moving like whispers in embroidered silk. You enter not as a foreigner, but as a courier, bearing goods and a story tied together in rare tea and rumors. The guards barely glance at you. Jin Zhao gets more attention. Someone asks if he's part of a parade. You pretend he is. Madame Wei disappears into the bureaucracy, navigating ministries like a silk-threaded labyrinth. You're left to wander the outer halls, where you glimpse concubines in powder-white makeup, eunuchs carrying trays of plum wine, and one old man polishing a bronze mirror that never reflects the same image twice. In a quiet garden, a painter offers to sketch your portrait. Not for money, he says, but because you look like you've seen all the seasons in one breath. You sit, he paints, you doze. When you wake, he's gone. The painting's left behind. You're not in it, but your shadow is, stretched across a bridge, reaching toward something just out of frame. You leave the Forbidden City with fewer goods, but more stories than you can carry. You join a new caravan headed west, toward Xi'an, where this all began. The journey home is quieter, familiar roads, new eyes. You pass again through villages where nothing has changed, except you. You wave to faces you saw months ago. Some recognize you, some don't. The monk with you has started snoring in full sentences. Jin Zhao has become oddly affectionate. You begin to suspect he missed this more than you did. One evening, as you camp outside a cracked pagoda overrun with moss, you unpack everything you've collected. A glass sphere from Venice, a scroll from Cappadocia, a coin from a Visigoth-avoiding inn, a poem on silk, a feather that might be from a phoenix or a really unlucky rooster, and 1,000 memories wrapped in silence. You hold the painting from the Forbidden City up to the firelight. The shadow hasn't changed, but now you think you understand what it's reaching for. It's not a place. It's a moment. And that moment is almost here, because soon, so soon, you'll be back in Xi'an, older, tired, a little richer in both coin and confusion. But you won't be arriving as the same person who left. The road back into Xi'an feels like a story finishing its sentence. You crest a low ridge at dawn, the sky still smeared with ash-blue shadows. And there it is, the old city, still wrapped in its proud stone walls, still wearing the dust of 1,000 caravans like a crown. You pause your step. The drum towers, the tiled rooftops, the slow river threading through its heart, none of it has changed. And yet you have. Completely. Quietly. Jin Zhao snorts behind you, as if impatient with your sudden poetic mood. He's grown rounder since this journey began. You suspect he's absorbed both wisdom and several people's lunches. You re-enter the city not as a wide-eyed errand runner,